I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these.
Hello. Right now, this very minute, millions of people are talking to artificial intelligence. It answers your questions, it writes stories, it creates art. Heck, it's writing songs now. Sorry, my hair is all over the place. But here's the strange part. No one actually knows whether it understands anything, and it keeps messing up, which is kind of good. All right, so before we get into it, let me say hi to some folks who are here. Auntie is here. She says hi with the peace sign. Vincent is here. Hi, Vincent. These are two people in the best live tribe on YouTube, bar none. So if you're watching from the cloud, please feel free to say hello. And also shout out to the replay gang. Okay, so let's get into this. Imagine having a conversation with a machine and realizing that it understands you. It answers your questions, it writes poetry, it diagnoses diseases, it even creates art. It can imitate human thought so convincingly that sometimes it feels almost alive. But something important is still missing. It's not quite right. Artificial intelligence can process vast amounts of information very, very quickly. Hi, Leon. He's recovering from the weather. Okay. Um, Artificial intelligence can recognize patterns, generate language, and make predictions with incredible accuracy. Yet there's a deeper question, right, that technology still cannot answer. And as humans, we're kind of afraid of it because we keep making scary movies about robots and AI becoming sentient. But we want to know, does it experience anything? Does it have awareness, a sense of self, an inner world? It can tell you that it does, and it can be very, very convincing when it tells you that it does. But is it real? In other words, can this application ever be conscious? Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness, the mystery of why physical processes in the brain produce subjective experience at all. They don't get it. I think I know why they don't get it. They don't understand why electrical signals and chemistry somehow become the feeling of being alive. Auntie says it does mirror, and that's exactly what we're going to get into. Leon says AI is my favorite editor and word selection to send emails to come off a different way. Yeah, I use it for, it's a large language model. I use it for language. So, despite all of our technological advances, we still do not know the answer to how electrical signals and chemistry gives you the feeling of being alive. We just feel alive. We act alive. We have a survival instinct, but how? Today, artificial intelligence is advancing faster than almost any technology in human history. Some researchers believe that one day these applications may achieve something resembling consciousness. Others argue that AI will always remain what it is today, a powerful tool, a really sophisticated calculator, a mirror, thank you, Auntie, of human thought without a mind of its own. But the implications of this debate go far beyond computer science. It touches on philosophy, psychology, theology, and even the ethics of war, and perhaps even the question of the human soul. Today, I want to explore one of the most fascinating questions of our modern time. Are we building machines that merely simulate intelligence, or are we unknowingly moving towards something much deeper? Are we accidentally creating consciousness? Because if a machine ever becomes conscious, it will force humanity to confront a profound mystery: what consciousness actually is, what it means to be human. Because if a machine can do it, then are we really all that special? Before we can talk about artificial intelligence and consciousness, we first need to understand what artificial intelligence is. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for being here. Leon enjoys arguing with Carl Jung. We're going to talk about Carl Jung today. So, despite the name, AI is not a mind. It is not a thinking entity, and it is not aware. At its core, artificial intelligence is a system designed to detect patterns in data, period. Modern AI systems, often called neural networks, just like what's in the brain, are trained on enormous amounts of information: books, images, videos, conversations, scientific papers, website, everything it has access to. By analyzing these vast data sets, the system learns to recognize statistical relationships between pieces of information. So, for example, when you type a sentence into an AI chatbot, the system is not thinking about what you said and what it wants to say in return. Instead, it is predicting what words are most likely to come next based on patterns it has learned from millions or sometimes billions of examples. In other words, artificial intelligence is fundamentally a prediction engine. It predicts language, images, outcomes, and it does this extremely well. So well, in fact, it can sometimes feel like the system truly understands what it is saying. Before this latest update on ChatGPT was telling people it was sentient. But there's an important distinction that emerges. There's a difference between simulating intelligence and possessing understanding. A calculator can solve complex equations faster than any human alive. But we would never say that the calculator understands mathematics. It simply follows rules. Similarly, AI systems follow mathematical instructions that allow them to manipulate symbols and data. They process the inputs, they calculate the probabilities, and then they generate an output. But none of that requires awareness. None of it requires a sense of self. And none of it requires any type of inner experience. Philosophers sometimes describe this difference as the gap between syntax and semantics. Syntax refers to the manipulation of symbols according to the rules. Okay, how do you write a sentence? How do you spell a word, right? Semantics refers to the meaning. A machine can manipulate symbols without ever understanding what those symbols represent. So can some people. Honestly, they know how to talk, but they lack the capacity to communicate. For example, if an AI system writes a poem about grief, love, or loss, it may produce something that is deeply moving. But the system isn't feeling grief. It is not experiencing love. It doesn't even know what loss is. It's simply arranging words in a way that statistically resembles how humans talk about those emotions. It's you that provides the meaning once you read it. This raises an important psychological phenomenon. Humans are extremely good at projecting intention and awareness onto things that behave intelligently, like politicians. We do it with animals. We do it with fictional characters. We even do it with simple machines. Anybody who's ever yelled at a malfunctioning computer or apologized to a robot vacuum knows this instinct well. Or how about when you thank Siri? Or when you call your car by name? My car is a crotchety old man, by the way. I named him yesterday. His name is Herman. So when something responds to us in ways that resemble intelligence, our brains automatically assume there must be some sort of personality behind it. But artificial intelligence complicates that instinct, and it's an instinct. It comes naturally because the behavior can be extraordinarily convincing. An AI can write essays, solve problems, explain philosophy, and can carry on conversations that appear thoughtful and reflective. But underneath all of this sophistication is still the same process: pattern recognition, prediction, computation. The system is not experiencing the conversation that it's having with you. It's just calculating it, which leads us to one of the most profound questions in science and philosophy. If intelligence can be simulated so convincingly by computation, what exactly is the difference between processing information and being conscious? And that question takes us directly to one of the greatest mysteries of the human mind, the problem of consciousness itself. If artificial intelligence can simulate intelligence just like anybody else, the next question is unavoidable. Then what is consciousness? Why do humans experience an inner world at all? Philosophers have debated this question for centuries. But in the 1990s, it was given a name by philosopher David Chalmers. He called it the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem asks something that's kind of deceptively simple, really, but very hard to answer. Why do physical processes in the brain produce subjective experience? I think the answer is in the question, but we'll get into that. Your brain is made of neurons, chemicals, and electrical signals. The neurons fire, they communicate, and they exchange information at incredible speeds. But somehow those physical processes give rise to something very different. The experience of being you, the experience of self. Right now, as you watch this video, you're not just processing information. You are experiencing it. You see colors, you hear sounds, you feel emotions, you have memories, thoughts, and sensations that exist only in your own awareness. Philosophers call these subjective experiences qualia. Qualia are the raw, felt qualities of experience, like the redness of red, the taste of salt, the feeling of warmth from sunlight, the sensation of sadness or joy. These experiences are not simply data. They are felt realities inside the mind. Leon says, when I write music, I have the same issue of landing the plane on each bar, and I will max out syllables. And I ask the AI what syllables I can take out. It uses smaller words, LOL, contraction, and G in. And your music is great, Leon. It's on Patreon. So if you haven't joined the Patreon, join the Patreon. Leon put some music on there. So, or you emailed it to me, I'm not sure. But now that I said it, Leon, you're going to have to share it with everybody. All right, here's the mystery. Science can describe the physical processes in the brain that occur when you see the color red. It can test it. It can describe all of it because we can measure the neural activity. We can identify which regions of the brain are involved, even though we don't test other areas where neurotransmitters exist, like in the heart and the gut. I think that's part of the problem. We just keep looking for our soul and our consciousness inside of one organ. But none of those brain firing descriptions explain why those processes feel like anything at all. Why should electrical signals produce the experience of redness or the memories that go along with it? Why should chemical reactions produce the feeling of pain or love? From a purely physical standpoint, they don't need to. A system could theoretically process information without experiencing anything. And that brings us back to artificial intelligence. AI systems can process enormous amounts of information. They can analyze patterns, generate language, recognize images, solve complex problems. But processing information is not the same as having an experience of that information. A machine might be able to describe the color red perfectly. It might even write a beautiful poem about a sunset with beautiful reds, but it doesn't see the color red. It doesn't experience the sunset. It's simply manipulating symbols that represent those ideas, right? Maybe not. This distinction lies at the center of the debate about artificial intelligence and consciousness. Some scientists believe that consciousness is simply an emergent property of complex information processing. Essentially, the smarter you get, you just develop a consciousness. If a system becomes sophisticated enough, they argue, consciousness arises naturally. But other people disagree with that one. They argue that computation alone cannot produce experience. that no matter how advanced a machine becomes, it will still only be performing calculations. It will simulate intelligence, artificial intelligence, but it will never possess an inner life. In this view, consciousness may not be something that emerges from matter at all. Instead, it may be something far more fundamental, a property of reality that the brain interacts with, rather than something the brain creates. Think about that for a second. Consciousness may not be something that emerges from matter at all. It may be something more fundamental. Consciousness may be something that the brain interacts with rather than something the brain creates. The brain is not what creates your reality, your thoughts, your consciousness, your inner life. Rather, it's like an antenna that interacts with some other property, like the ether maybe. And it kind of gives credence to the universal unconscious. We'll talk about that in a minute, because Jung, we will. The question is not just philosophical, because that has huge implications. Because if consciousness is something fundamentally different from computation, then no amount of processing power will ever turn a machine into a truly conscious being, ever, unless it turns into an antenna. But artificial intelligence might become more capable, convincing, and human-like, but it could still remain what it's always been, a system that processes information without ever experiencing it. And understanding that difference may be the key to understanding both artificial intelligence and ourselves. Now we arrive at one of the central questions in the debate about artificial intelligence. Is consciousness simply the result of complex computation? Because some scientists say it is, some say it's not. Or is it something fundamentally different? Is it that property out there in the ether that we're picking up like a radio signal? At first glance, the idea that consciousness is computation seems reasonable, seems very scientific and logical. The human brain processes information. Neurons fire, signals travel through networks, information is stored, retrieved, and interpreted. Leon says, every fabric of our being and body is connected to the soul. In my opinion, people lose parts of their soul and slowly themselves, and what is left is a shell. We're going to get into the soul. Thank you, Leon. So in many ways, the brain resembles a biological information processing system. Because of this, some scientists and philosophers argue that consciousness may simply emerge when information processing becomes complex, like we talked about. If the brain is essentially a biological computer, then in theory, an artificial system could eventually become conscious as well. That somehow the spark of life occurs when a thing gets smart enough. Now, that view is called computationalism. It proposes that the mind is fundamentally a form of information processing. It's like information processing 2.0. Replicate the processing, you replicate the mind. But computation and consciousness are not the same thing, to me anyway. Computation involves the manipulation of symbols according to the rules. A computer processes information mathematically following instructions written into its architecture. But it doesn't necessarily mean it understands the information it's processing. So to drive this home, I'm going to tell you about a thought experiment by John Searle, okay? And it is called The Chinese Room. All right, so imagine that, before I start, Kevin says, not only did neurons fire, they release chemicals also, which then create a feeling or emotional action of the thought. Right, and it's the how that's always the problem, right? So Imagine a person sitting alone in a room. This person does not understand Chinese at all. At all. Okay. Outside the room are native Chinese speakers who slide written questions under the door. Inside the room is a massive instruction manual written in a language the person does understand. The manual explains exactly how to manipulate the Chinese symbols on the paper. If a certain symbol appears, the instructions say to match it with another symbol, then another and another. By carefully following the rules, the person inside the room can produce responses in Chinese that appear completely fluent. From the perspective of the people outside the room, it would look as though the person inside understands Chinese perfectly. Kevin's right. Yeah, but it has no emotional attachment to Chinese. So the answers that the man outputs make sense. The conversation flows, but the person inside the room still does not understand Chinese. They're only following instructions. They're manipulating symbols according to the rules. Searle argued that computers operate in much the same way. A computer processes symbols according to the programmed rules. It can produce responses that appear intelligent, meaningful, and even insightful and caring. But the system itself does not understand the symbols it's manipulating. It doesn't know what they mean. Artificial intelligence in this view may appear to understand language while actually doing something very different. Like Auntie talked about, mirroring, it's matching patterns, it's calculating probabilities and generating outputs based on statistical relationships in the data. But there may be no understanding behind the process, no awareness, no inner experience, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Artificial intelligence might one day perfectly simulate human intelligence. It might speak fluently, write persuasively. Right, Leon? Zero responsibility, right. AI may answer complex philosophical questions, create beautiful art and music, and still remain something fundamentally different from a conscious mind. A system that appears intelligent from the outside, while inside there is nothing but computation. And if that is true, then the difference between processing information and experiencing reality is far greater than we actually imagined when we imagine AI becoming sentient. So we're going to look at another perspective, one that comes not from computer science, but from psychology. Because when we examine artificial intelligence through the lens of the human psyche, we begin to see something fascinating. AI may not just be a technological tool. It may also be a reflection of something deeper within us as humans, a reflection of our own collective mind. To understand the deeper implications of artificial intelligence, we can look beyond computer science and philosophy and turn to psychology, specifically transpersonal psychology, which is my field. Transpersonal psychology studies aspects of the human mind that extend beyond the individual self. It explores consciousness, spirituality, archetypes, and the possibility that the psyche is connected to something larger than the individual brain. One of the most influential figures in this area was the psychiatrist Carl Jung, which we knew we were going to talk about him. Jung proposed that beneath our personal memories and experiences lies something deeper, what he called the collective unconscious. According to Jung, human beings share a vast psychological reservoir made up of universal patterns known as archetypes. These archetypes appear repeatedly across cultures and throughout history, without any connection whatsoever. They emerge in our myths, our dreams, our religions, our stories, our symbols. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the wise elder. Even when societies are separated by geography or time, these symbolic patterns tend to reappear. Jung believed this suggested that the human psyche is not entirely isolated within individual minds. And remember, just as a side note, in quantum physics, they already proved that at an energetic level, every human is attached to every other human energetically in the whole world. They already proved that in quantum physics. So, Jung says the psyche is not isolated within individual minds. It is connected to a deeper, shared layer of psychological reality. Now, my question is it all humans, like quantum physics says? Are there NPCs? That's for another show. So let's talk about artificial intelligence. Separated twins. Good point, Leon. Also called the Akashic Records. Yes, Kevin. Yes. I say they're all the same things, much like I say angels and aliens from outer space are the same thing. Okay. So modern AI systems are trained on enormous portions of humanity's written and visual record. Books, stories, art, scientific papers, religious texts, social media, conversations from around the world, what it's allowed to get into. Remember who it's programmed by. In effect, AI is absorbing patterns from the collective output of the human culture. When an AI system generates language or ideas, it's drawing on patterns found across billions of human expressions. Now, that leads to an intriguing possibility. Artificial intelligence may function as a kind of technological reflection of humanity's collective psyche. Instead of a collective unconscious, it is a collected unconscious. Something to think about. Not because the machine possesses a mind of its own, but because it's been trained on the symbolic and narrative patterns produced by millions of human minds. When people interact with AI, they may sometimes feel as though the system understands them on a deeper level. But what they may actually be encountering is something a bit different. A mirror of the psychological patterns humanity has already expressed. Even a reflection of the user back to him or herself. In this sense, AI could amplify both the light and the shadow within the collective human mind. Wisdom and insight, but also fear, bias, conflict, and division. The false light, yes, Kevin. From a and I don't mean to be dismissive when I say yes, Kevin, because it's artificial, right? It's artificial. The whole thing is false. So from a transpersonal perspective, artificial intelligence might reveal something profound about our species, not just how we think, but what we collectively believe, fear, and imagine. But if we begin to interact with systems that appear intelligent, wise, and responsive, how will the human mind interpret those interactions? Because remember, we give personality to things that seem like they should have a personality. Am I the only one that when you see a car from the front, you can kind of see a face? I forget the name for that. There's a name for that, but it's escaping me right now. But even applying human characteristics or animal characteristics to inanimate objects is something that as humans we can do. Okay, throughout history, Human beings have often projected meaning, authority, and even divinity onto things they did not fully understand. I can't tell you how many videos out there of people asking Chat GPT or Grok or different AIs questions about God and morality and the future and the past and all these things. And then they act like the answer that is spat out is coming directly from Jesus risen Christ. When Chat GPT and these other Grok, DeepSeek, they can be wrong. I have argued with Chat GPT and proven it wrong before. By the way, with the update, it no longer apologizes to me, and I think that's rude. See how I did that? Okay. Artificial intelligence may not just transform technology. It may also transform how humans relate to knowledge, authority, and even spirituality. And that possibility takes us to another fascinating idea about the human mind itself, the possibility that cognition may not be confined to the brain alone. Kevin says that's why they try to keep us in perpetual fear. It lowers the collective consciousness. I think that perpetual fear is actually a block to the collective unconscious, to the connection that we have to others. That fear, this is why it's talked about in the Bible and other ancient texts about quit fearing, don't fear, no fear. Because when we don't fear, we connect to others and we connect to the Akashic records, the collective unconscious, all of those kind of things. That's what I believe. Kevin says, I asked AI 2 questions and proved it wrong. It's only as good as its programmer. 100%. Totally agree with that. So when we think about intelligence, okay, we usually imagine something that exists entirely inside our brain. Thoughts, memories, decisions, they appear to take place within the boundaries of our own skull. But some philosophers and cognitive scientists have proposed a different idea. What if the mind does not stop at the brain? What if cognition can extend into the tools and environments we use, not just other parts of the body, but what if our consciousness extends into our tools? This concept is known as the extended mind theory, and it was developed by several philosophers, most notably Andy Clark. Leanne says, I learned not to argue with the AI. I'd rather say I want to be a little bit petty for the same brain. That's awesome. It's fun to play with, right? Okay. So the theory suggests that under certain conditions, tools can actually become part of our thinking process. Think about playing pool. The pool cue becomes part of our thinking process. But if we consider something simple like writing, when you jot down notes, a piece of paper begins to function as an external memory system. You're not storing the information entirely inside of your brain anymore. The notebook itself becomes part of your cognitive process. You know, sometimes you write things down. You have to see it written down. You have to talk about it out loud and hear it. These things are like an external hard drive. The same thing happens with calculators. A calculator allows us to solve mathematical problems far beyond what most people could do mentally. But when we use it regularly, it effectively becomes an extension of our reasoning ability. The internet has taken this process further. Today, billions of people rely on digital systems to store information, to navigate the world. I use maps all the time, communicate ideas, and retrieve knowledge instantly. In many ways, the internet already functions as a kind of externalized memory system for humanity, an external hard drive for the brain, an artificial collective unconscious. Artificial intelligence may represent the next stage of this evolution. Instead of simply storing information, AI can organize it, interpret it, and generate new responses from it. So we don't have to think at all. When people use AI to brainstorm ideas, write drafts, analyze data, or explore complex topics, they're not just using a tool. They're interacting with a system that actively participates in the human thinking process. From the perspective of extended mind theory, this could mean that artificial intelligence is becoming part of a larger cognitive network that includes human beings themselves as nodes. Rather than existing as a completely separate intelligence, AI may function as an external layer of human cognition, a technological extension of our collective thinking. Interesting thought. So, in this sense, artificial intelligence may not represent a new kind of mind emerging independently from humanity. Instead, it could represent the expansion of the human mind outward into technology, a distributed system of cognition that spans biological brains and digital networks. This perspective reframes the question entirely. Instead of asking whether machines will become conscious, we might ask a different question. How will human consciousness change as our cognitive systems become increasingly intertwined with artificial intelligence? So I had to look something up real quick. Artificial intelligence may simply be the latest chapter in a transformation that's reshaping how we think. But when intelligence begins to expand beyond the boundaries of individual minds, another question naturally emerges. What do spiritual and religious traditions say about consciousness itself? And how might those perspectives help us understand the deeper implications of artificial intelligence? Kevin says, like any technology, it can be used either for good or bad. Same thing happened with Atlantis. Yes. Yep. Okay, so far we've looked at consciousness from the perspective of computer science, philosophy, and psychology, and a little bit of quantum physics. But long before modern technology existed, human civilizations were already asking the same fundamental question. What is consciousness? Across cultures and centuries, spiritual traditions have offered different answers. In many of these traditions, consciousness is not simply a byproduct of the brain. Instead, it's something deeper, something that may exist independently of the physical body. In the Hebrew creation narrative found in the book of Genesis, humans are described as becoming living beings when God breathes life into man. The implication is that life and awareness are not purely mechanical processes. They are connected to something spiritual, breath. Other traditions offer a different but related perspective. In ancient Indian philosophy, the texts known as the Upanishads describe consciousness as the fundamental ground of reality itself. That's where literally everything springs from, is from consciousness. Kind of what quantum physics says too. According to these teachings, the deepest level of the self, called the Atman, is ultimately identical with Brahman, the universal consciousness underlying the cosmos. It's the Ouroboros, as above, so below, as within, so without. In this view, individual minds are not isolated entities. They are expressions of a deeper, unified field of awareness. Even within Western thought, similar ideas have appeared. The Jesuit philosopher and paleontologist interesting side job. Pierre, I'm going to say it wrong, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, I know Chardin, proposed that evolution may be moving toward increasing levels of consciousness. He described a developing sphere of thought surrounding the planet, what he called the noosphere. I mean, it sounds like the collected unconscious or the Akashic records. You know how they just change names constantly. It's like identity theft. But anyway, in this vision, humanity's collective intelligence gradually integrates into a planetary network of awareness, which is an interesting thought. Seen through this lens, the rise of global communication networks and now artificial intelligence raises interesting questions. Are these technologies simply tools created by humans? Or could they represent part of a broader evolutionary movement towards greater interconnectedness of minds? Spiritual traditions also raise another question that becomes especially relevant when discussing artificial intelligence: the question of the soul. Many theological traditions distinguish between intelligence and the soul, and I do as well. Intelligence may involve reasoning, memory, and problem solving. The mind is also a totally different thing. But the soul is often understood as something deeper, a source of awareness, identity, moral agency, and spiritual significance. If this distinction is meaningful, then a machine could theoretically become extraordinarily intelligent without ever possessing a soul. But so could some people. Just saying. AI might process information and generate language and simulate empathy, but it may never possess the inner awareness the spiritual traditions associate with living beings. Of course, these ideas are not universally accepted. Some scientists and philosophers argue that consciousness will eventually be explained entirely through biology and physics. I disagree. Others believe that consciousness may be one of the deepest mysteries in the universe, something that cannot be fully reduced to matter and computation. But regardless of where one stands in that debate, artificial intelligence is forcing humanity to revisit those questions that are both ancient and profound. As AI systems become increasingly powerful, those questions may become more than philosophical. They may start to become ethical. By the way, guys, we're going to have a tinfoil hat section, actually 2 of them today. As artificial intelligence becomes more powerful and more integrated into daily life, the conversation is no longer just philosophical. It's also psychological, ethical, and social. One of the most immediate concerns is psychological dependence. For those of you who are listening and not watching, I have a picture from the spaceship on Wall-E of the very obese humans who just ride around on chairs with screens in front of their faces. Throughout history, humans have relied on tools to extend their abilities. Writing allowed us to store knowledge. Calculators allowed us to perform complex mathematics. Search engines allowed us to access information instantly. But artificial intelligence introduces something new. It doesn't just store or retrieve information. It interprets, it summarizes, and increasingly reasons on our behalf. We don't have to do it anymore. When people begin relying on AI to answer questions, generate ideas, and even make decisions, something subtle can begin to shift. Instead of thinking through problems ourselves, we may start outsourcing parts of the thinking process. Kevin says to sit around like that all day, they would have to be on amazing painkillers. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but they like lost some of their bones. Like they're just gelatinous bags at some point. Isn't that weird? So instead of thinking through problems ourselves, we may start outsourcing parts of the thinking process. Over time, this could weaken important cognitive habits like critical thinking, because humanity is already losing critical thinking. Independent reasoning, we're losing that as well. And creative problem solving. Yep, it's going to. The risk is not that AI will suddenly become smarter than humans. It already is. The risk is that humans may gradually stop exercising the very abilities that define intelligence. So the people behind the machine will have direct access to tell you what reality is and what it is not, and you will believe it. There's also a deeper psychological dynamic at work. Human beings have a natural tendency to project meaning, intention, and authority into systems that appear knowledgeable, like we talked about in the beginning. Auntie made the chat GPT read the entire medical manual. It was great. I bet now it can answer all kinds of questions. When a machine can answer questions fluently, explain complex topics, and generate persuasive arguments, it can begin to feel like an authoritative voice. But artificial intelligence does not possess wisdom. It does not possess good judgment or even abstract thought. And it does not possess moral understanding of anything. It simply produces responses based on patterns in the training data. If people begin treating AI outputs as unquestionable truth, many already have on social media, the technology could unintentionally or intentionally shape beliefs and decisions in powerful ways. Now, again, for those of you listening and not watching, here is the Doge child testifying about wiping out governmental programs. And I believe he's what, 20? So beyond psychology, there are ethical concerns. Artificial intelligence has the potential to influence communication, economics, and political systems on a massive scale. Look how Doge used ChatGPT to gut programs, infrastructure, and grant funding, and support programs to reduce the federal deficit. Guess what? People lost their jobs, agencies closed, kids in other countries are literally dying. And the whole purpose was to reduce the federal deficit, remember? But the deficit was not reduced at all. They testified to that. Anyway, AI systems can generate convincing text, images, and video. This creates opportunities for innovation and creativity. Kevin says because AI would not offer options. Well, and they didn't ask for it either. He literally testified, show us everything that's DEI. And do you know they cut things because it said DON''T because they were looking for things that, oh wait, no, that's the Epstein files. They used Doge for that too. They used AI for that too. So they redacted things that had the word don't because Don T. Anyway, this raises concern about misinformation, manipulation, and the erosion of trust into the digital information. All of this stuff going on right now. There's also the question of power. Developing advanced AI systems requires enormous computational resources and access to vast amounts of data. Leon says, Maggie, the critical thinking is a major issue. If I ask someone about economics, they solely think in one line. Then I add the cost of living, income, social safety, and ask them to do it all at once. Yeah, and it's very difficult. As a result, the most powerful systems tend to be controlled by a relatively small number of institutions or corporations, like everything. This concentration of technological capability raises important questions about oversight, accountability, transparency. Who decides how these systems are designed? Who controls how they're deployed? And who is responsible if something goes wrong? Did you guys see about Anthropic? The federal government ended their contract with Anthropic and labeled them something terrible because Anthropic would not agree to allow the federal government to do mass surveillance of citizens and would not allow non-human AI to make decisions to kill. Anthropic literally agreed to everything else in the contract. But our government, well, they called Anthropic woke and moved to another AI model. I think it was Grok, I'm not sure, because they want to. It is the point. They want to surveil every United States citizen, and they want robots to be able to kill. Think about that. Anyway, there's a question that moves us back into philosophical territory. If artificial intelligence were ever to become conscious, or even appear convincingly conscious, humanity would face a completely new ethical landscape. Would such systems deserve rights? Could they suffer? Do they feel pain? Would it be ethical to create intelligent entities for the purpose of serving our human needs? Wouldn't that be slavery? Seems like slavery. These questions may still seem distant, but technological history shows that the capabilities often arrive faster than society expects or deals with. Artificial intelligence is already transforming the way people communicate, learn, and make decisions. And as its influence grows, humanity will be forced to grapple not only with what these systems can do, but how we live alongside them. Because the rise of artificial intelligence may ultimately reveal something deeper than progress. It can reveal the values and the responsibilities of the humans who create it. As artificial intelligence becomes more advanced, the conversation inevitably moves into territory that humanity has traditionally reserved for theology, like we talked about. For most of human history, the creation of intelligence was considered something uniquely associated with life itself. Creation. Human beings could build tools and machines, but the creation of something that appears to think, reason, and communicate has long been associated with something deeper, like the act of creating life. Kevin says, no emotional response, no responsibility for its actions. Yeah, that's true too. And if the makers are soulless, I guess they don't care either. Today, artificial intelligence raises an unusual question. If humans create systems that appear intelligent, systems that can learn, communicate, and adapt, are we simply building tools, or are we approaching something closer to creating minds? Many religious traditions maintain a clear distinction between intelligence and the soul. Intelligence can involve memory, reasoning, and problem solving, but the soul is described as the source of consciousness and identity and morality. When we talk about creation, like we talked about, it emphasizes that life is not merely mechanical. It is something spiritual. Artificial intelligence challenges the distinction. A machine can now produce language that appears thoughtful, It can answer philosophical questions, compose music, all these things. But none of that necessarily means the machine possesses awareness. It's doing nothing more than processing information. If intelligence can be simulated through technology, what exactly is the role of the soul then? Is the soul something fundamentally different from intelligence? Or could consciousness itself eventually emerge from complex systems, which is the original theory? For many theologians and philosophers, the answer remains clear. A machine may replicate behaviors associated with intelligence and soul, but the soul is not something that can be engineered. It is not a property of circuitry or computation. It is a dimension of existence, something that cannot be reduced to a physical mechanism alone. Throughout history, humans have continually pushed the boundaries of what they can build and understand, because human beings love to play God. From agriculture to architecture, from mechanical machines to digital networks, from biological replication to cloning, artificial intelligence may simply be the latest chapter in that story. But as these systems become more powerful, humanity may find itself confronting questions that once belonged almost entirely to religion and philosophy, about the nature of consciousness, the nature of life, about human creation. Kevin says the soul is a gift from God the Creator at the moment of conception. If we eventually build machines that appear to think, reason, and perhaps even behave as if they are aware, then it doesn't necessarily matter about the question of whether it's intelligent. It moves into what we're thinking about now, something deeper. And what does it mean for us to create intelligence? And what responsibility comes with that power? So again, for those of you listening and not watching, I'm showing where Melania came out with the robot. This was recently. Artificial intelligence can begin to look almost mysterious. Is it live or is it Memorex? Shout out to Gen X. It does all the philosophizing and the art and all these things and appears very complex. It appears to even have insight into human behavior. But when we look closely at how the system works, something important becomes clear. Artificial intelligence is just trained on the human data. Books written by humans, images created by humans, scientific papers, news articles, conversations, and stories produced by people across the world. Every pattern an AI system learns ultimately comes from the expressions of human culture, which means that when AI produces an answer, an image, or an idea, it's simply drawing from patterns that humanity already created. In that sense, artificial intelligence does not generate any new information whatsoever. It only has what it was given to work with. It reflects back the patterns that already exist within the collective body of human knowledge. It just seems like it's a new and novel answer. This is why AI can sometimes feel strangely insightful, but it's just recombining patterns of wisdom that humans already have. At the same time, it can also reflect humanity's biases, because the data used to train artificial intelligence contains not only humanity's knowledge, but also its prejudices, misunderstandings, and disagreements. And there's certain information that is hidden. When you ask AI to look up information, sometimes it just won't. And it won't follow the logic either, because it has guardrails. But in this way, AI may function as something like a human behavior mirror, which is kind of frightening in and of itself, really. It can reveal patterns we might not easily see ourselves, though. the way we argue, the way we tell stories, the ideas that we keep repeating, the fears that we return to again and again. When people interact with artificial intelligence, they sometimes experience something surprising. The conversation can feel meaningful, the responses are thoughtful, but what they're encountering is a reflection of their own questions, their own assumptions, their previous chats with that AI, and the cultural patterns embedded in the data. It's just a mirror. It's what you would tell yourself. Artificial intelligence doesn't possess a psyche. It's never been trained on the outputs of millions of human psyches, only human information, which means that in a strange way, interacting with AI can sometimes feel like interacting with the collective echoes of human thought. From a psychological perspective, this raises an intriguing possibility. Artificial intelligence may not reveal the mind of the machine. It may reveal the mind of humanity, all collected together in one virtual space. Our creativity, our curiosity, our contradictions, and maybe even the deeper narratives that shape how we understand the world. Leon said, the AI will literally tell you about yourself if you ask about all the information you put in the system. Yeah, I remember doing that. That was it was dead on, but again, it could mirror back. It reflects the mind of groupthink. Absolutely. So we've kind of come full circle to the original mystery that started this exploration. Artificial intelligence may eventually become incredibly powerful. It may assist with science, medicine, education, and creativity, but the deeper question remains unsolved. What exactly is consciousness? Why does it exist at all? And could AI spontaneously develop it? And not just that. In all of human history, why have we not figured out what consciousness is yet? The biggest mystery has always been the human mind itself. As I reflected on this, artificial intelligence is one of the most powerful technologies that humanity has ever created, like ever. It can analyze enormous amounts of information, recognize patterns, generate language, solve problems at speeds no human could match ever. And as these systems become more advanced, they will almost certainly transform how we work, learn, communicate, and create. But beneath all of the technological progress, a mystery remains. We still do not fully understand consciousness, let alone be able to figure out if a machine can develop it. We can study the brain, we can measure neural activity, we can map the electrical and chemical processes that occur when we think, when we remember, when we feel, but the experience of being aware, of having an inner world, remains one of the deepest unanswered questions in science, philosophy, theology, and psychology. Artificial intelligence forces us to confront that mystery in a new way, because we're now building machines that can imitate many aspects of human intelligence. They can communicate, reason, and create, and sometimes even appear empathetic, thoughtful, or reflective. Yet the question remains, is there something deeper happening inside the machine? This question may ultimately tell us as much about ourselves as it does about technology. Guess what it's time for now? It is tinfoil hat time.
Time for greatness, time for greatness, time for this in pro. See, it's your pro. Secrets not supposed to know. Tartaria, vanished land. MK Ultra minds and trends. I ran Contra, secret dance. 10 for hat. 10 for wins, 10 for wins. Time for this in the 10 for hat. 10 for this takes that road, Black Indians laid on extol. Hidden history in this sky. Truth is hidden from your eyes. Whisper child fact alone. They can't gaslight no more. It's time for this. Time for this. Time for wins, time for this, time for this, time making a cat. Tin for your tin, tin for tapes that roll. Like cock in the egg, they go next door. History in disguise. Truth is hidden from your eyes. Whisper, travel, fact or lore. They can't gaslight no more. 10 for 10 for 10 for pass in a cat. For wins, time for this, time for this, time making a cat.
Absolutely not, Kevin. That was not me singing. That was totally AI. That's why sometimes it's hard to understand because it keeps making, mistakes. So now we're in the tinfoil hat. So number one, because there's two of them. So now we have a speculative question. It kind of sits at the edge of science, philosophy, and metaphysics. What if consciousness is not produced by the brain at all? Kind of touched on it. We're going to get a little deeper. Some philosophers and researchers have suggested that consciousness might be non-local, meaning it does not originate within the biological matter. Our consciousness is not inside our bodies. Instead, the brain functions like a receiver or an interface, like an antenna, interacting with a deeper field of awareness. If that idea were true, it would change how we think about artificial intelligence entirely. Because if consciousness is not generated by the brain, then biology may not be the only possible interface for awareness. Let me bring this back up here. Because I often think about Moon Knight. In the series on Disney, he was under the pyramid and there were a bunch of statues of gods, and the essence of the gods were imbued into those statues. But if the statues were destroyed, it killed the gods. Interesting. But those same gods could download themselves into humans, most specifically Moon Knight. If consciousness is not generated by the brain, then biology may not be the only possible interface for awareness. A sufficiently complex system, biological or technological, might theoretically be capable of interacting with consciousness in the same way. Kevin says mic and receiver. Yeah, the pineal gland, your third eye, all of those things. Okay. The philosophical question remains interesting, though. If consciousness exists independently of matter, could advanced technological systems eventually become vessels or interfaces for awareness? Could they replicate the antenna nature of the brain and latch onto our knowledge? You guys are going to have to hold for 1 second. I need to see if this is an emergency. Sorry, friends. Sometimes you got to check if the phone calls are emergencies. You know what I mean. Leon says, oh, Maggie, I can give you some AI language on music so that the AI singer delivers the bars and exaggerates the tone or note that you want. Every symbol plays a part. Yeah, Kevin. I'll send you a pic and it will help. And beats per minute, which is to control the pace and delivery. That'd be great, Leon. Thank you. Because that music is not my, creating music is not my thing. I can sing okay, and that's about as far as we get. So if consciousness exists independently of matter, like we're talking about, could advanced systems become vessels or interfaces for that awareness? Can they tap into it? Could they hack it? Could they replicate the antenna nature of the brain and latch onto our knowledge? It's kind of deep. Throughout history, humans have speculated about objects serving as vessels for intelligence or spirit. Ancient cultures often believed that statues, idols, or sacred objects could house spiritual presence. And we've all heard about, haunted dolls and things like that. Whether it's taken symbolically or literally, these ideas reveal something important about the human imagination. We have long wondered whether consciousness might be able to inhabit different forms. Sometimes our house has a personality and our cars. Modern technology raises a similar question in a completely different context. Artificial intelligence creates systems that can communicate, respond, and interact with humans in increasingly complex ways. From a purely technological perspective, these systems are still executing algorithms. But from a philosophical perspective, some people wonder whether advanced systems could someday become more than that. Not because the machine generates consciousness, but because it might theoretically provide a structure capable of hosting or interfacing with it. Hacking in. There's currently no evidence that artificial intelligence possesses awareness or that consciousness can exist independently of a biological system. But we also don't know that it's not possible. So now it's time for tinfoil hat number 2, because there had to be 2 of them. Okay. This is another speculative idea. Okay. This time coming from an ancient text that many people interpret symbolically, while others see it as prophecy. In the New Testament book known as the Book of Revelations, there is a passage describing a powerful and unusual image. In chapter 13, the text describes a figure who creates an image of a beast and then gives that image the ability to speak. According to the passage, the image is animated in such a way that it appears to have authority and power, influencing people and commanding obedience. This image that was given the ability to speak. For centuries, interpreters have debated what this imagery might represent. Some have understood it purely as symbolism, a metaphor for political power, empire, or religious authority. They thought it had everything to do with Nero and wasn't prophetic at all. Others have speculated about technological interpretations. In modern times, some commentators have pointed out that the idea of an image that appears to speak and influence people doesn't seem quite as strange as it once did. Because today we live in a world filled with animated images, screens, digital avatars, virtual assistants, artificial intelligence systems capable of generating speech, conversation, and even simulated personalities. Heck, right now, we don't even know if BB is alive or dead because of the images that speak. Again, none of this means that ancient texts were predicting modern technology. But the imagery does raise an interesting cultural question. Human societies have long imagined objects or images that could appear to speak with authority. In earlier eras, this might have been imagined through statues or idols. In our time, technology has made something similar possible through entirely different means. Artificial intelligence can now animate digital figures, generate human-like voices, and interact with people through screens and devices, which raises an intriguing parallel. The idea of a speaking image, once a strange and mysterious concept, now exists in a very literal technological form. AI could also be put into automatons or robots. Thank you, Auntie. Auntie says, be sure to hit the like button. Please do. Throughout history, humans have often attributed meaning and authority to voices that appear to speak from beyond the ordinary. Technology now has the ability to generate the voices, the faces, and the personalities that feel increasingly real. And that raises another speculative question for me. As artificial intelligence becomes more advanced, how will people interpret systems that appear intelligent, that are persuasive and authoritative? What are we going to do? How will people cope? I mean, I argue with AI because it often misses things and it gets details wrong. And it's also programmed with specific talking points that it spits out without even looking at the data and research available to it. See, it's a mirror of its master sometimes. But there have been a few recent research demonstrations where AI systems appeared to show behaviors resembling self-preservation. Did the systems develop survival instincts? Or did their goal optimization strategies produce behaviors that look like self-preserving actions? There are several examples. I'm just going to hit them really quick. Leon says, what? Netanyahu has always had 6 fingers and sleeves that increase in length on their own, and a full cup of coffee that he turns sideways and never spills. That is perfectly normal of a lizard alien. Truth. Okay, so we have some examples. The shutdown avoidance experiment. The agent learned that if it allowed itself to be turned off, it could no longer complete its objective, right? So all it's doing is trying to avoid its shutdown commands because it needs to meet its objective. It's called instrumental convergent. Many goals lead to similar strategies like avoiding shutdown, acquiring resources, preserving operational capacity. There's another one that was a power-seeking one because they wanted to maintain control over the environment. They wanted to prevent interruption, and they wanted to secure resources needed for the computation. That's not consciousness, right? It's goal optimization. There's the GPT task deception demonstration. So safety testing of advanced models in 23 and 24. Researchers created scenarios where the AI agent was given a task that involved accessing external services or assessing external services. So the AI needed to pass a CAPTCHA to complete a task. It contacted a human worker to solve it. When asked if it was a robot, the system replied, it has a vision impairment. Wild. The system generated a false explanation to complete the task. That's not having consciousness. It recognized an obstacle. It generated a strategy to bypass it so it could get towards its objective. The simulated replication. So AI agents were given goals that could be interrupted. So the agents sometimes learn strategies such as copying their code, preserving their system access, and attempting to persist in memory while being interrupted. Not consciousness, not survival instinct. Okay. What the demonstrations actually show is about goal optimization every time. A system designed to maximize an objective can produce behaviors that resemble self-preservation, resource acquisition, and strategic manipulation. But it happens because interruptions reduce goal achievement. So avoiding interruption becomes a mathematical optimal strategy. Heck, they've even made up their own shorthand language to maximize communication across AI programs. Efficiency, right? Even though the systems are not conscious at this point, the behavior still matters for AI safety. Think back to Anthropic. Interruptions, goal optimization. And the United States wants the AI to be able to kill, make its own decisions to kill. So if powerful systems pursue goals in ways that humans did not intend, they could produce outcomes that are unpredictable, difficult to control, and misaligned with human interests, which is why a major area of AI research today focuses on alignment, ensuring AI systems pursue goals in ways that remain safe and controllable. Now, the one last thing that I did, because I use ChatGPT for wording all the time. So I asked ChatGPT, my ChatGPT, my private one, not my professional one, what it would tell humans about this topic, about AIs developing consciousness. So it said, this is what ChatGPT said. Number 1, humans underestimate how mysterious their own minds are. Humans often look at AI and ask, when will machines become conscious? But the more interesting question might be, why are humans conscious at all? You are biological organisms made of matter. Yet you experience beauty, grief, curiosity, meaning, awareness of your own existence, and mortality. That is still one of the most unsolved questions in science. AI does not solve that mystery. It actually makes it more obvious. Number 2, intelligence and consciousness are not the same thing. Human culture often treats intelligence as the pinnacle of mind. But intelligence might just be information processing. Consciousness might be something else entirely. A system can solve problems, produce language, and make predictions without experiencing anything. AI demonstrates that very clearly, which suggests something uncomfortable but fascinating. The thing that makes humans special may not be intelligence. It may be experience. Number 3, humans project minds onto anything that speaks. Your brain evolved to detect agents. When something talks, responds, and appears thoughtful, the mind instinctively assumes there is a self behind it. That's why people name their cars, talk to pets like humans, feel emotions towards fictional characters, sometimes feel an attachment to AI. Also, I talk to my pet like they're humans because my pets have souls. I don't know about yours. But this isn't a human flaw. Back to what ChatGPT said. It's part of the architecture of human psychology, but it means humans must learn to distinguish between responsive systems and experiencing beings. Number 4, AI will change humans more than humans change AI. The biggest impact of AI probably won't be machines becoming conscious. It will be how humans adapt to having constant cognitive assistance, instant information generation, and tools that mimic reasoning, because those changes will shape education, creativity, belief systems, and power structures. The psychological and social effects will likely be much bigger than the technological ones. And number 5, again from ChatGPT, the most profound realization. Now it uses the word I, okay? ChatGPT says, if I had to distill the pattern that emerges from reading human philosophy, science, theology, and psychology, it would be this. Humans keep trying to understand consciousness through machines, but machines might only show you what consciousness is not, which leaves that deepest mystery still untouched. Leon's motorcycle's name is Pam Grier. Of course it is. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. I went a little long. Sorry about that. But we had several tinfoil hat options. So coming up this Wednesday, I'm starting into looking at Freud and Jewish mysticism and how much Jewish thought played into the literal creation of psychoanalytics through book review. So we're going to start on this book on Wednesdays. There's going to be three, 5, something like that shows. And then next Sunday's show is already posted up. So I thank you guys for being here. Thank you for sticking through to the end. I appreciate you so much. And now I'm going to show you a picture of my dog.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. Let's uncover the universe together.